My concerns are really more about this process and whether or not these provisions that are in this bill will ultimately be misused for political purposes. That is my concern, and it's a real one. There's a constant argument made by the majority that Republicans want to suppress the vote, and that our arguments about the dangers of voter fraud are made up, and they're not real, and that really we're just trying to prevent certain people from voting. That's disgusting. I don't want to attribute to anybody in this room, but it is something that every Republican legislator that I know has been accused of numerous times with no evidence. And we're here, and I would suggest that this bill is likely to leave this room unanimous in an effort to allow people an expanded way of voting as a result of COVID-19. But fraud is a real thing. And an expansion of absentee ballots is a concern because fraud is rampant even without this expansion. And this legislative body needs to, in the next cycle, the next legislative session when the Government Administration and Elections Committee meets, it needs to tackle that issue to make sure that the integrity of our elections is not questioned. Our system of government and laws only exists, is only going to be trusted to make the laws if our elections are legitimate and trusted by the people. When that goes away, so does our ability to have order and have a just society. I want to point out that even Senator Looney, in this room a year ago, if I can find his remarks, said the following. While discussing early voting, he mentioned that voting in the voting booth is essential protection because of the secret ballot and the privacy of the voting booth. He said the House took up this issue, and that is opening the process potentially to universalization of absentee balloting. And I think that is legitimately controversial, because in reality, we never really know for sure who is casting an absentee ballot. And I agree with him. The problem with absentee ballot fraud is that it is not uncovered ever, and if it is, it's usually long after the fact, and it's impossible to find out who the perpetrator is. The way absentee ballots work is that they are more or less private. There is no identifying information to really trace them back to the person that might have been involved. And I don't want to get into any examples of fraud today. We've had that debate in here before, and I'm certain that we will have it many, many more times. I want to confirm something that came up in the House. So, Madam President, I have a question for the proponent that is maybe the most important thing I've asked throughout this entire process. It was discussed in the House, and I would like to confirm once more right here that this bill, the one that's before us that we're going to be voting on, does not contain any authority for the Secretary of State, past, present, or future, including our November election, to mass mail absentee ballot applications. There is nothing in this bill that has to do with that. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Haskell.
Thank you, Madam President, and it's good to see you up there. I thank the good senator for his question. Title IX, Section 140 is not impacted by this legislation in any way. As the good senator may be aware, this is the state statute that allows individuals to circulate absentee ballots. It allows candidates to circulate absentee ballots. It allows partisan town committees to circulate absentee ballot applications. And it is so crucial that the Secretary of State, in sending out absentee ballot applications for the August 11th primary, or if she chooses to do so for the November 3rd election, is acting within the power granted not only to her, but to many, many, many actors in the political process through Section 9, Title 9, Section 140 of our state statutes.
Thank you very much, Senator Haskell. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you very much, my colleague, for making that clear that this bill does not impact that whatsoever. And whether or not she had the legitimate ability to do so is a separate matter altogether. But I think because this is a relevant bill, this is the time to address this concern. An amendment was offered in the House to discuss the same exact situation, and I believe it needs to be addressed here also. The fact is that while I am very much in favor of allowing people to vote by absentee ballot because of COVID-19, I believe we need to use the existing process, which is you contact the town clerk or you do it online, but you request your absentee ballot, the same as we always did for the other reasons that are valid excuses for voting absentee. That is the only legitimate way for us to conduct an election. This mass mailing of every person who is on the voter rolls is, in short, a disaster. I have heard from countless constituents, and I have a stack of them right here of people who have contacted me, sent me copies of things showing that they have gotten something that is suspect with regard to this mass mailing. The fact is that there are tens of thousands of people on the voter rolls in our state that don't belong there. They have either moved to another state, or they've passed on, or they're on there multiple times because they have lived in different addresses, or they got married and their maiden name is still a registered voter and so is their married name, and that is all showing up right now. Just a few examples. Leslie Jane wrote me and said that simply, should I be receiving 2 of these ballots? I would say no, you shouldn't be. Teresa Corbin wrote me and said a copy of an image that her daughter sent her indicating, by the way, he is dead, referring to the person it was addressed to, which I believe was the previous resident. My friend Alexandra shared a post on social media that says that her friend Chris and his friends were curious why a person might receive 2 absentee ballots for the same individual, one with their maiden name and one with their married name, and they put photos of them online for the world to see. Jeff Weiss says there is 0 procedure in the town clerk's office to verify applications. Jason Webb wrote me and said, State Senator Rob Sampson, I received multiple absentee ballots to my address in names that I have no idea who they are, and I contacted my local election office and notified them, and all I got was, nothing we can do about it. Mike Joswick wrote me and said, my father got an application for an absentee ballot. He's been deceased for 4 years. Elizabeth wrote me. She said, we got a ballot request for someone who, according to property records, hasn't lived there in 5 years. Sherry wrote me. My mother received one for a woman who doesn't reside at her house. Susan, my grandfather has been dead for 25 years and received one. Unreal. Andrew wrote me. We received ours the other day. They sent my youngest son an application, but he hasn't lived in Connecticut for 4 years. TJ wrote me. I received mine and one for my son who moved out of state over 5 years ago. I could go on. I have pages of these. Most of them are for people that moved away from that residence, but many of them are for college-age students, I presume, who moved to another state and are voting in that state, but they're receiving an absentee ballot application at their parents' address, whatever. Deceased people. The problem is that our voting rolls are not accurate. The fix for that is to only allow people to request them when they need them. It's been the system that we have used and has been satisfactory for all of the other excuses on the absentee ballot application. Active duty in the military, absence from town, my illness, which has existed on this for years, physical disability, etc. Those have all been acceptable reasons in the past. We should not change that process now. I've also heard the Secretary of State say that so far 100,000 of these ballot applications have been returned to her. Further evidence that the list is wrong and these ballot applications are floating around out there. With that, Madam President, I will offer another amendment. which is to offer an opportunity to my colleagues to prevent this from happening again. We're going to deal with it through this primary election, right or wrong, because it's already been done. But we don't have to deal with it in November. We can use the existing law, the system that has been in place, with the simple addition of COVID-19 as a new eligible excuse that we all agree to. I want to offer an amendment, Madam President, to prevent the mass mailing of ballot applications to every person and use the existing system instead. The clerk has an amendment that is LCO 3838. I'd like it to be called and have the opportunity to summarize.
Thank you very much, Senator Sampson. Mr. Clerk, do you have that amendment?
I do, Madam President. Senate
Please
Amendment.
Please proceed.
Senate Amendment B, LCO 3838 for House Bill 6002.
Senator Sampson, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. This is a very, very simple amendment. It adds 3 sentences to the end of the bill that says, notwithstanding the provisions of subdivision 1 of this subsection, the Secretary of State shall not mail unsolicited applications for absentee ballots to any person. This means if someone wants to vote by absentee, they go through the current and legitimate process. And this will not be a concern that will disrupt our November election. And I encourage my colleagues to please vote for this. I think we are all very much in favor of the bill about COVID-19, taking care of that. I think the people of this state want to see that happen also. This is something that I think people are concerned about legitimately.
Senator,
move adoption.
Yes, did you move the amendment?
Yes, I move adoption, and I'd like a roll call vote. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Haskell?
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the good senator's remarks. I want to encourage my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, and I would love to take an opportunity to briefly explain why. First of all, it is precisely the opposite feedback that I've been hearing from my constituents. I can't even begin to tell you how many folks have reached out to say, wow, it was so convenient to have the absentee ballot application mailed to me prior to the August 11th primary. I might have forgotten to vote about the August 11th primary, given everything that's happening in the news. So contrary to the senator's experience with his constituents, my constituents have greatly appreciated this opportunity. I also want to take a second to make a very important distinction, and that is the difference between an absentee ballot application and an absentee ballot. When an absentee ballot is falsely delivered to somebody, if somebody casts a vote pretending to be somebody else, that is a huge crime. It is a state crime and a federal crime, since we have federal candidates on the ballot, and it is punishable, once again, Madam President, by 5 years in prison per ballot and a $5,000 fine. However, we are not talking about the mass mailing of absentee ballots. What we are talking about, Madam President, is the distribution of absentee ballot applications, a form that, as the senator has said earlier, is widely available online for anyone to donate, a form that can be distributed and circulated freely according to our state statutes under Title IX by town committees that are partisan and by candidates, and many candidates from both sides of the aisle often decide to do so. Here's the key difference about what's happening here. Unlike partisan actors in this process, the Secretary of State's office has actually asked for a address return requested. That means that towns have an opportunity in this August 11th primary to make corrections. And the good senator is right. Our voting rolls are not perfect. I don't know of anyone in this building who would claim that we have perfect voting rolls because, Madam President, they literally change every day. As people die, as people move into our community, our voting rolls are constantly changing. However, local officials in Town Hall perform an annual canvass to do their best they can to make sure that they're accurate. And Connecticut was actually spearheaded an interstate conglomerate called ERIC, it's an acronym, that makes sure that our voting lists are regularly updated. If a voter moves out of state, so long as that state participates in our online database, then our voting rolls are updated. They are not perfect, but we are all constantly striving to make them better. And by mailing absentee ballot applications during this primary, We are learning a lot about the process, the Secretary of State's office, but more importantly, town officials are learning who no longer lives there, who's deceased, how can our voting rolls be improved. And that is just an added benefit to the Secretary's decision, as she is free to do under Title IX, although it is not contemplated in this bill, so long as this amendment doesn't pass, to send out absentee ballot applications to every registered Democrat and every registered Republican. With that, Madam President, I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator. Mr. Clerk, could you please, I'm sorry, yes, Senator Wickos.
Thank you, Madam President. Sorry about that. I just wanted to speak on the amendment
I'm
as well.
sorry, I apologize,
It's
my
okay.
fault. I'm just rushing the process.
Yeah. And I will be very brief. Yeah, I stand in support of the amendment. I think Senator Sampson, the author of the amendment, brought out some very stark examples as to why we want to make sure that we have the utmost confidence in our elections, because it is one person, one vote, and we would never want to question whether the validity of a vote is accurate based on a mass mailing. And I want to thank my previous speaker, who spoke about the ability to print out an application, and different people can disperse those applications. And I wanted to show, I guess, make the point that Senator Sampson's amendment doesn't speak to or prohibit that from happening. In fact, that practice can continue. What his amendment does is speak to the mailing of, mass mailing of blanket applications to all registered voters here in the state of Connecticut. There's a cost involved with that, Madam President, and we all know that the financial, I guess, outcome of the financial condition of our state right now warrants the fact that we need to look forward to saving money where we can. This does not prohibit anybody from voting. They can still, as the good senators that spoke prior to me said, people will disperse them. You can go to the library, you can print them off, but we can certainly save state dollars by not allowing the mass mailing of applications to anybody. If you want to vote, you'll vote. You'll figure out a way to get your application to you, and by the end of the day, when this bill becomes law, you'll have the ability to vote if you're in fear of COVID by absentee ballot. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Are there any other comments? Are there any other comments? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, if you could call for a roll call vote on the amendment.
There's an immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered on the Senate. For Senate Amendment B, LCO 3838 on House Bill 6002.
Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Please ensure all votes are appropriately cast. Mr. Clerk, could you please read the tally?
Total number voting is 36. Total voting yea is 14. Total voting nay is 22. Absent not voting is 0.
Thank you very much. The amendment fails. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm disappointed that I'm 0 for 2 on amendments on this bill. And we've pretty much covered the whole bill section by section. So I think I will just kind of wrap up by reminding everyone that voting in person is crucial to our society having faith in free and fair elections. When you show up to the polls to vote, you can see that the process protects the privacy of the individual's vote, is free from voter intimidation, is orderly, it's well managed. You feel that your vote is taken seriously and that it's going to be counted. And that, maybe even most importantly, that you are participating in the great experiment of America and self-government. Now, COVID-19 has clearly thrown a wrench in everything, not the least of which is our elections. But I'm hopeful that this is only a temporary wrench and that someday we are going to get back to normal. As I said from the outset, I am going to vote in favor of this bill. And you can tell if you've listened to any part of this debate that I have strong concerns about some parts of it. But I feel like I'm essentially boxed in, and that if I want to very clearly and affirmatively support my constituents' desire to have COVID-19 as an acceptable reason to vote absentee, I've got no choice but to vote this bill forward, warts and all. And I am hopeful that the things that I brought forward as concerns throughout this debate, whether it is the expansion of Election Day registration and the long lines that will undoubtedly exist in our major cities after 8 p.m., and I feel for the many volunteers and registrars that will be involved, and I'm hopeful they can tackle the problems they're going to be faced with. I'm concerned about these post office box-looking ballot boxes, and I am very hopeful that they are not tampered with or damaged in any way. I learned just a few minutes ago, someone told me that those ballot boxes are only looked after during the weekdays. So essentially, if someone drops their ballot in on Friday, it's not going to be retrieved until Monday. I just think there's way too much risk and not enough supervision in that process. And I believe our system of elections needs to be treated with the highest standards possible, that we make every effort to let every citizen of this state know that their vote counts and that we're not playing games here. And we are not going to just say, well, it's okay if 1 or 2 of these ballot boxes were tampered with, the election's still good. In order for an election to be treated as a legitimate election, people have to believe with all their heart that all the votes counted, that the result is what was intended by the people voting, and that every person's vote matters as much as every other person's vote. And some of these provisions put that in jeopardy, and that disturbs me. But I am glad that we are going to pass this, and we are going to do it in this legislative body the right way by debating it and voting on it as the representatives of our constituents. And I encourage my colleagues that even with the warts this bill has, it is important and necessary to ensure that people can still vote even if they have concerns about COVID-19. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator.